We're live.
Good morning. Spirit Sessions, A View of the Light is back, and we welcome you. Last week, there was a wee bit of trouble with Blue Jeans, but that's not stopping us. Later on, Rhonda worked hard on that, and she put out that video so you could still find it. Today, we're welcoming you in with a new guest that we are so excited about. So, while you're coming in, let us know where you're from, send us some hearts, and share this out with all your friends because today we have an amazing, amazing storyteller that after we met him, I was afraid to sleep with the lights off, okay? So he's got some good stories to tell us, and I can't wait till you guys hear it. And so stay tuned all the way to the end, and we will tell you who our winner is, and the winner who shares it out this week wins with Rhonda Elliott, and whoever shared it out the most last week wins a session with me. So, without further ado, tell us about our guest, Rhonda.
Well, I am so excited to introduce you to Jim Perry. He's the podcaster of my favorite podcast, Euphomet. And Euphomet this season is called Euphomet Obscura. He's what I really love about Jim is he gets into the story. He actually puts himself in the story. He's talking to the people in the actual story. He gives you that feeling of actually being there. You know, whether he's talking Bigfoot, UFOs, or haunted hotels. He's there, and I mean, truly, yeah, it gets a little creepy, and you got to be in the right space for it because you can be really creeped out by him because he's such a good story. And when he's not doing that, he's running DEFY Wrestling, which I think is so cool because that's another storytelling kind of thing going on. And like, I don't know, two diametrically opposed, but maybe they're the same thing. They're kind of both kind of paranormal to me. Yeah. So, Jim, how did you get into this? How did you get into delving into the paranormal? Like, what brought you in there?
Yeah. Well, thank you, first of all, for having me. It's great to talk to you folks again. You know, I think since I was a really young child, I was encountering a lot of paranormal-like energy and vibes without really maybe even associating that term with it. Growing up in the Pacific Northwest, anyone that's from here can tell you that the lore associated with this place, whether it's Bigfoot or UFOs, is we're just lousy with it, essentially. There's so much of it, and it's really built into our culture. It's not rare to be driving down any sort of desolate highway and have Bigfoot's Sasquatch statues, you know, sort of lining the entrance to gas stations. And so even on a very anecdotal, kind of funny level, it's just, you're always inundated with that. And I think between that and the grayness and the wetness, you know, you're kind of living in an episode of Twin Peaks or the X-Files every day, or at least you can convince yourself of that, right? So in addition to that, and being a huge fan of Art Bell and not being able to sleep as a kid and just listening to that all night long and watching reruns of
And then you could sleep
In Search
after
of.
Art Bell?
Yeah, I was a strange kid. I've always been a strange person in that way, I guess. But no, not all the time, to tell you the truth. You know, because the thing with the paranormal, I think one of the things that entertained me about the topic as a kid is it felt close to home in a lot of ways. It felt like, even though if it's not something you see every day, there's something close to the surface. And one of the ways this demonstrated, and one of these ways I think that I became more open or reticent to the idea that, oh yeah, these things happen, is, you know, for example, my mother would pick up the phone and just start talking to my grandma. And I'd kind of be like, as a kid, like, that's strange. Phone never rang. How do they do this? And then same, you know, I'd be at my grandma's and she'd just pick up the phone and just start talking to my mom. And so they had a relationship that was perhaps very psychic. and was so commonplace. I mean, that was an occurrence that would happen nearly every day, if not multiple times a day. So, things happen like that as a kid. You can sort of take them for granted, but I think it helped instill just this sort of openness to me.
And you to me, you've told us a few stories, and you're more connected than you let on in your podcast, because you've seen lots of things, and being that open and connected must give you great insight. But can you tell us about your UFO encounters first? Because those are really kind of cool. And then we'll leave the scary one for later. But just first, Bex, we've got people coming in from all over. So how about Sharon?
Nancy Louise is saying good morning from North Carolina. We have Claire from the UK and William from the UK, Victoria from Texas. So yeah, we got people from all over coming in to say hello, and they're excited to hear all about this. So thanks for joining us, everybody.
Good morning,
Somebody
everyone.
from Northern California is up and around too. That's awesome. Tell us about your UFO encounter and how you dragged your wife along into that one.
Sure. Yeah, always a good thing to do to your significant other is drag them into paranormal experiences they may not be ready to be a part of. But this was more of a chance encounter, not too dissimilar to how the majority of the sightings that I think folks experience. Sometimes these things happen to you when you least expect them. Perhaps while you're in a state that allows you to tap into this, and I can talk about that later if you want. I'm starting to formulate some sort of belief system, or at least feeling in that regard, that maybe you guys might know a little bit more about than I do. But essentially, it was a nice and fair skied day, and my wife and I were driving through the Cascade Mountains, and we'd come to this location called Skykomish. And, driving the rural highway road, we noticed a reflective object, approximately, maybe 100, 300 yards from where our positioning was. And this thing seemed the size of a helicopter of sorts. There was some gravitas to what its actual physical size was, and its movement was startling to us, because at first I thought, well, it's a sunny day, reflection off of a Cessna or something like that. Your mind, and rightfully so, goes to logistical, reasonable, based in this 3D reality, explanations of what these things can be sometimes. And I go, hey, I asked my wife, do you see that up there? And she goes, I do. I wasn't going to say anything about it. I do see that. And as we're watching this thing and thinking like, oh, maybe it's who knows what it is. At that point in time, we really couldn't understand what it was, because its speed and its movement became to be so unlike anything I've ever experienced at that time. In terms of, I had a description I think I may have mentioned to you guys before in the last show, which I'm struggling to come up with at this moment. But it was a startling display of. It was frightening for a second. For a second, being as interested and connected to these stories of UFOs and aliens, and being a product of 90s culture, and how that was such a big part of everyone's lives. At that moment, it was, I think, one of the first startling experiences of my life, where it was if this is true, what else can be true sort of moment. And this was demonstrated by this object, essentially moving with a gracefulness and an erraticness in the sky that no modern, aerial technology, terrestrial aerial technology that we know of, could accomplish. And at that point, it flew really just kind of whooshed, faster towards the horizon than, sort of like in a snap of the fingers than one could even imagine. And for me, I was, after that moment of kind of being like startled and like, oh wow, that was real. I don't know what that was, but that was real. I was exhilarated by that. I had to like focus on driving again. Like, oh yeah, I'm operating an automobile. Like, keep on the road. But what I took away from that was my wife was she met it with a different reaction to her having that experience. For her not to have, sort of marinated herself in the, sort of diaspora of paranormal lore and everything else for decades, she met it with some fear and like, hey, are we okay? If those things exist, are we all right? So it was a very interesting study about, to me, the relationships people may have with this phenomenon, and I think it is emblematic of people's different perspective on what these experiences mean to them for their physical space in this world and maybe even their spiritual space in this world. And sometimes it's a positive thing, and sometimes it's maybe a little bit of a negative thing.
Pretty cool. This season on Euphomet, you're calling it Euphomet Obscura. So you're going back. Can you explain what you're doing with this season?
Yeah, absolutely. So Euphomet, we completed season 1. It was 18 episodes. I had traveled all over the world doing these audio documentary features on folks who have experienced paranormal activity or are involved with paranormal activity on a daily basis. And they're really stories about the unknown of that and our relationship to it, with the emphasis being our relationship to it. These are not really, strong evidential breakdowns of, UFO documentation or ghost studies. They're really about the people. They're really about the people and what their stories are and how these events have changed and transformed their lives in various ways. So for Euphomet Obscura, after traveling around the United States for an entire year, embedding myself with these folks, sometimes for as long as a week apiece, sometimes sleeping on some of these folks' couch, going on adventures into mountains and into woods and into very scary bogs in West Virginia where people are shooting across the creek in who knows what direction. You're just hoping, not yours. After this, I came back with some stories and some audio that I had never got a chance to use that weren't appropriate to the narrative for the given episodes they were originally included with. So for me, it was a chance to go back, revisit some of these spaces, and also sort of reprocess some of these experiences myself. For me, I am personally engaged at a certain level when I do this work that it's hard for me to keep a very accurate travel log sometimes, because I'm concerned at that point in taping and recording and getting all the audio that I need and making sure that Instagram and social has some photography and that I'm covering my bases on that front. So for me to go back, revisit these episodes, and start to actually write down what some of my own experiences were in the form of some sort of travel log, it's been really illuminating to confirm what my feeling was, and that was that I experienced such a great wealth of varied, esoteric, and supernatural experience that I would be a fool not to start trying to write some of this stuff down, right? And so Obscura is really an opportunity for me to just like dig through that tape and share nuggets that were kind of not a part of the original season.
Yeah, it's awesome. I was re-listening to it this morning before. I love sharing them with my husband. Because they freak him out.
Yeah, awesome. Very cool. Yeah, they're freaky. Yeah.
They are. They can be freaky. we were discussing like 1947, and I said, okay, so when was the first atomic bomb dropped, like open air testing? And he has to figure it out. I said, maybe that's why they showed up. He's going, oh, shut up.
Yeah.
Oh, shut up.
Yeah, I mean, I feel, you guys possess a certain level of tapped in ability, and I feel that you even bringing up 1947 is very telling, because something no one knows in the Euphomet audience is that one of the next series that I'm investigating and researching right now is propelled through 1947 and the experiences that folks had at that time, and what else could be going on. And it goes in a lot of very strange places. And so there are some incidents that happened up here in the Northwest, both notable and very sort of not very well known in 1947, that really kicked off that entire wave. And there are things about the events that transpired here in the Pacific Northwest that have definitely never been featured on a podcast, and certainly have really not come to light. And I think I'm finding some connections, and I'm finding some personal stories that will allow me to tell this sweeping narrative, really, that I've been lost in for the last 6 months in researching, that will illuminate some new things, maybe about ourselves and our relationship to that UFO phenomenon. And so it's very interesting that you just bring up 1940, because it's all I think about right now. I'm surprised I don't have a 1947 tattoo on my wrist or something that I could stare at, because it's, I have a book right here with me of Maury Island UFO incident, which was 1947, and all these great UFO documents and FBI files. So that's a little sneak peek for Euphomet listeners who are listening, that there's something very exciting on the way that's going to happen next, right after Obscura, and I think before season 2 of Euphomet.
That's awesome. Thank you. So we can find you wherever we download the podcasts. What does Euphomet, the actual word, mean? Just tell our audience.
Yeah, I made it up, and
awesome.
It's maybe like a euphemism on a euphemistic Baphomet, like playful devil. I wanted some form of maybe duality in that role, and we're addressing and talking about some things that could be considered sort of dark and scary, but approaching them from a very heart-centric way, hopefully, where people can connect with this stuff emotionally and connect it with an openness. Because I think that for as scary as these stories can be, my hope is that I can disarm folks a little bit and make them more comfortable in this space. And a part of that is just for folks knowing that they're not alone, that more often than not, most everyone has had experience they can explain, or an experience that no one can explain, right? And sometimes that just takes a little bit of jogging their memory. And I think a show like Euphomet can do that sometimes. And they can build a relationship with this phenomenon in a different way that's maybe more healthy.
Now, you've been to, tell us about your, there's like more worldly scary experience, which this is the one that made Teresa stay up that night. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, I'm
about
sorry.
Your own personal out of body
So
kind
cool,
of experience. No, not really out of body. I guess your friend was out of body.
Somebody was.
Yeah. You're referring to the West Virginia hotel, yeah?
Yeah, the West Virginia
Oh my
hotel.
God.
Yeah.
So I've been nervous, like 100% transparency, I've been nervous retelling the story, because I've only told the story maybe 4 times ever. And I felt like when we were talking before, I had really nailed. So now I'm like, oh, pressure's on to tell this thing. So for one of the episodes of Euphomet, I traveled to West Virginia, the hollers of West Virginia, Braxton in particular, the home of the Flatwoods Monster. I traveled there with paranormal investigator Greg Newkirk. By travel, I mean I made him drive me to this location from Cincinnati. And so he came with me. He had an experience there, not a paranormal experience, just a friendly experience with a man named Wes. And Wes had essentially what some would claim was an imaginary friend as a child. Others may claim it's more like a spirit guide, more like a mentor, more like some sort of ascended master. And Wes had this story of being a kid, being visited by this individual. Of course, it's an individual no one else can see, just him, building a relationship that allowed Wes to learn certain things about nature, about science, that essentially he'd come back and demonstrate this ability to understand where to plant certain things, what fruit that you can eat, how you can track certain animals, experiencing a level that was way further advanced than a kid should know, that was corroborated essentially with sort of regional and local Native American understandings and teachings, and that his folks were like, where are you getting this stuff? And it was his friend Pol. Now, he had this relationship for years with Pol, and it's described in the episode, and it went into some very interesting and fascinating places that I think really illuminated perhaps our connection to the past and who we are as people today, and especially on a very personal level, was very fundamental to who Wes is today. But what had happened during this conversation, I encourage everyone to go check out that episode. I think you'll like it. What happened is, as we were standing in this sort of derelict hotel that Wes had now co-owned with his father for several years, right on sort of Main Street America, cold country, what started to happen was that we began to believe that Wes possessed some sort of psychic ability, and that he had possessed this ability since he was a kid, and that maybe it was an ability that he never tried to truly tap into, and that he wouldn't disclose this with folks for, sort of fear of what would be said and what would be thought about him. And he's describing certain things that he can do, or that he's afraid to do all the time. He's reading our auras, and Greg is standing there, being a much more seasoned, and I'm a storyteller and a podcaster. I'm not really a paranormal investigator. He is, and he's seen it all. And so, he's standing there, and he's just assessing the situation. He's like, I think, Wes, you have some sort of ability that you're not tapping into here. I think you're psychic. I think you're maybe a medium. Wes goes, well, I see stuff in this hotel. I see stuff here all the time. Do you want to see the places where I see these things? And of course, I'm recording. I'm not going to say, no, let's just stand here by this single lamp that's illuminating this dark 3-story, old derelict hotel. Yeah, let's go ahead and investigate these dark hallways and corridors. So that's exactly what we did. We left the confines of the comfortable atrium area. We started walking down these dark hallways, and imagine, the perfect sort of Hollywood art-directed version of what a haunted, abandoned hotel would look like. That is exactly what this was. You're walking down this cool hallway with a little bit of a breeze, sort of filling your shirt, going over your skin, and walking past open doors to rooms that have been abandoned long ago, with maybe a single bed frame with windows that are illuminating just the sort of radiant street lighting, with tattered curtains hanging, with providing interesting and spooky organic-like silhouettes. And you start to feel, wow, this is an interesting place, and it's not hard for someone to believe that something else is going on here just because of your location. So it's charged in that way. So in situations like that, I like to focus in on the work, and I feel like I become more brave in those situations because I'm recording, and I'm worried about my recording quality at that point. And so I focus in, put the shutters on, we're going to work. And so I follow Wes through these dark hallways, and as we emerge into the center of the building, the nascent lights of the sort of shuttered windows are gone, and we're left in essentially almost, sheer darkness outside of the sort of absent light from one downstairs stairwell. So we can see the silhouette and the highlights of each other. And Wes is showing me this bathroom, and he goes, "This is the bathroom where I see the woman. I see the woman, and the tub is full of blood. And the woman, she's in here, and she's usually angry, and sometimes she's in the tub, and sometimes she has a baby." And at that point, once you connect to that imagery and you're standing in that space and you're feeling how dark that place is, it's alarming. It charges you whether you like it or not, and whether there's any activity there or not. It's spooky in general for someone to tell you that. And so at the same time you go, well, what's the veracity of that? Because that sounds very movie-like as well. So you're sort of skeptical side of the brain. Greg and I, it's challenging to see how to say how much skeptical side of the brain we have left. But hey, could this be legit? We think there's something here. Well, let's go deeper and darker into the hallway. How about? Wes wants to show us the room that he sees the most activity in, that he hates going by, that in fact he'll refuse to even walk by. And it is this door sort of at the end of the hallway. It's facing a stairwell. The stairwell, is a spiraled stairwell. And for those that are interested and curious about energy forms and how energy could pool up, perhaps like tide pools, if that's a thing, this is sort of like the perfect location for that, to have the recess of like sort of all that energy right there at that doorway. And he goes, "This is a room I just don't want to go into ever. This is the room where I see the man. He's like 6 feet tall. It looks like maybe he was from the Old West. He walks through here and he's usually pissed off at me, and I can't reason with him, and I don't know what to do about it." And so, Greg has seen this sort of stuff before, and he goes, "Well, how often, how often do you see this?" And he goes, "Well, it happens here and there, but it doesn't happen all the time. But that's also, I stay out of this area." As he says this, he looking around, and he goes, I feel him now." And he turns into the dark hallway that we just came through, pitch black, and says, "There he is. He's walking towards us." There's nowhere for us to go. There's nowhere for us to go. And this alleged spirit, this alleged ghost, is walking towards us, according to Wes, in angry fashion. According to Wes, yelling at him. He's spouting vulgarities, dropping F-bombs, saying, what are you doing? This place is a mess. This place is a mess. What are you doing? You got to clean this up. Angry. So as this is happening, you're left you're left questioning, of course, the veracity of it, but you can't help but feel. Now, if one has any sort of empathic sort of abilities, as some psychics claim that I do, and I'm not sure if they're right or not, but at that moment, it certainly felt like it. At that moment, I was charged, and the fascia, the muscle between my skin and bone, it was all chilled, and it hurt, like my body hurt, and as I stood there, I was recording, I was trying to go along with this. At that same time, now the woman is joining us. What do you mean, Wes? Yeah, she's coming out here, and she's covered in blood. And now he's yelling at her. So this happens for a good 5 minutes, this sort of back and forth, this exchange, terrifying minutes, until I finally snap out of recording mode. I finally go, well, I've got about enough of that kind of tape. And I say, can we go back to the lamp over here? And we exit the hallway. We go back towards the lamp. We go back to this atrium. And we've essentially created, we've encircled this floor. And so we're back to where we started. And, Greg is asking Wes about his experience and if he could just break down what happened, because at that whole time it was very heated and very emotional. And as he's asking his question, I'm interviewing Wes, and over Wes's shoulder I see that dark hallway and I see the frame of that door. And I'm looking around, checking out the scene as Wes is describing some of these events. Through that hallway behind Wes's shoulder floats essentially what looks like the bust of a man. It was at least 6.5 feet off the ground nearly. It was translucent. There was not a shimmer to it, but a luminescence to it. It looked like something out of Scooby-Doo. It looked like something out of a film. And it was the form of a human's head and shoulders and partial chest area and nothing else. And this thing, this light, this luminescent fog of sorts, this bust, floated into eyesight and then quickly dissipated almost as fast as it appeared. And I stood there and I tried to rationalize it. And throughout the night, as we were standing in that hotel, I tried to find reasonable explanations for it. I tried to watch that corner for the next hour and a half to see if there were street lights, if there were car lights, if there were whatever, some sort of explanation that could dissuade me from believing in what I just saw. And I was left in that state of trying to figure out what I had seen for the next night. Greg and I, we drove through West Virginia after that experience. We sort of drove through the night. We stayed in a hotel. We shared a hotel room. Went back to Cincinnati. And I honestly still don't think I've told him this full story. I didn't tell him on that night, and I haven't told him yet. And yeah, now you know. And I think that why I didn't talk about that, and even while I'm describing these events to you now, live, there is a shame associated with this phenomenon. And I'm not saying what I saw was a ghost. I don't know what I saw. But I was ashamed of seeing what I saw. And I was even more ashamed and afraid to tell people about it. because you don't know what people's impressions of that is going to be, even though it's so widespread, even though people having these experiences are more common than not. You feel like an outsider, even sometimes within, your own field, if you're involved in this stuff. And you also don't want to be seen as too eager to believe, because I also, as a storyteller, want to connect with the listeners in a very real and grounded way. I think that's very important. I feel like for me to engage in the kind of stories I want to tell is very important. So, you're left with this quandary of not knowing and essentially having to be okay with it if you want to proceed into this line of work. And it illuminated some things that I had wondered about, but had never really experienced myself. And I think it was an opportunity and a gift to better empathize with the folks that I talked to on my show. It was a chance for me to experience something so unbelievable that I could, just for a minute, I could allow myself to feel how some of these people maybe feel when I'm talking to them and they're sharing with me and with the Euphomet audience some of their deepest, darkest, most shameful experiences. And it's hard. It's really hard. And I think now I can better appreciate that, though. West Virginia.
Wow. And you heard it here first on Spirit Sessions. Like, hopefully, we want to hear podcasts about that one. We do.
Yeah, that's going to be good. We got to go
when you come out yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm working on that one right now, and it's taken me forever. In fact, for Obscura, I've allowed myself to deviate from my normal scheduled episodes, and listeners have, I'm sure, noticed that there hasn't been like a new episode, and that's because these last episodes for Obscura are so personal and so challenging to orchestrate that they're just taking more time, because throughout this process I'm having to figure out what my feelings are associated with them, how forward to be about certain things, and how much of it is about controlling what I say to help the actual message of the narrative and the authenticity of the story to really shine through. So yeah, I look forward to telling this story on the show. I just hope I'll be able to.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We've really enjoyed having you, and we've put all Jim's links in in the comments here to download, like, and subscribe to his Euphomet podcast. Go to his Patreon page, join his groups, join his Facebook. It's really interesting. We really appreciate you coming on today. And Bex, you're giving announcements today, right?
I am. I just want to say thank you to Jim for coming on, and that you really did it justice. It was scarier this time than last time.
Okay, good.
But,
Poor Teresa. Everybody's laughing at Teresa.
As you're telling it, I'm seeing it so vividly.
I got my black tourmaline.
I just, again, for you to be able to not only experience that, but then to share that is powerful. Because it's going to help you be able to connect with others on a deeper level. Having experiences is such it's a life-changing experience. You really don't know how to accept and move on, and integrate what you now know. Because again, like you said, if that's real, what else is, right? Now you've opened up to everything, and you can't deny anything's existence anymore. So it's a whole new journey. But thank you for sharing that with us, and we wish you a lot more excitement on your journey and a lot more, inspiring events, because, I think the way
beds.
no shaking beds, but, you're going to be the one who can really help people be able to understand and see a different perspective on what they've experienced, I think. So that's awesome. And
No,
yeah,
thank you so much.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you
thank
so
you so
much.
much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rhonda, for finding him, of course.
Yeah.
She brings in such fun people. Announcements. So the winner of last week's Share It Out, who wins a 3-card reading with Teresa Warren, is Marla Torres. Congratulations. Teresa will contact you to schedule your reading. Whoever shares out this week, and you know you want to get the story out, this is such a chilling but amazing story to be able to have people here and just, there's so many of us that have experiences and we don't talk about it. So it's really going to help inspire people and support them. Whoever showed up this week wins a reading with a Healing record session, with Rhonda Elliott. So share it out and we'll announce the winner next week. After this at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific is the Nourishing Your Multidimensional Body with Kathy Holmeyer. So check that out. Tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific is the Cosmic Ascension Report with Janelle Cameron for all the energies and all that, what's going on right now. If you want to be able to find out, what to expect this coming week, or if you're experiencing, the collective energy and you want to know what's going on, why your body's been a little achy or headaches or whatever symptoms we're experiencing, she is the go-to girl to help you understand a little bit better so you don't feel like you're losing your mind or getting sick, And there's also the Akashic Magazine that's free, and you can download that at www.theakashicacademy.com. And there's a link on there. Also, if you want to join the Inside group where you can get intuitive classes each week and Mindful Mondays and new moon and full moon ceremonies, that is $44.44 a month. And like I always say, Rhonda calls it the gym membership for your soul, and you'll actually use it. So it's definitely a cool thing. You get to have a soul family to support and love you through your ascension and your journey. And, we just love hanging out with all of you. And we're so grateful for you each week. And have a blessed week.
Namaste.
Thanks, everyone. And next week will be a surprise for all of us.
Yeah, we don't even know what's happening yet.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks again, Jim. And,
Thank you. Have a great week.
Spring ahead.